This is the Amy Edwards Show, and I'm your host, Amy. This show is here to help all of us live our best life and feel amazing at absolutely every age. We focus on transformation and empowerment through practical tools, strategies, habits, and mindset shifts that will help you unlock your potential, build self-love, and embrace your unique journey. We'll cover everything from health and wellness to personal growth and spirituality with inspiring guests and real conversations. So if you are ready to level up, break out of your comfort zone, and make lasting changes, you're in the right place. It's never too late. In fact, some of your best days haven't even happened yet. Let's get to it. Love this moment and make the next one even shinier. Hello, greetings and salutations. I am so excited that you're here today because we're talking with I know, I talk with badass people all the time, but she really, truly is walking the walk of a badass. And I'm just so excited to learn today because I feel like this can apply to so many of us in so many ways. So please join me in welcoming Alreen Haeggquist. Alreen is a powerhouse women's rights attorney. She's an author and the founding partner of Haeggquist Eck, LLP, a San Diego-based law firm built on justice, integrity, and heart. And with over 2 decades of experience, she has fought and won against some of the biggest names in the country on behalf of women facing sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. But what sets Alreen apart is not just her legal victories, it's her story. She's a survivor of childhood abuse and knows what it's like to carry silence and shame. And her personal journey of healing led her to become the fierce advocate that she is today and inspired her powerful book, Fired Up, Fueling Triumph from Trauma. Alreen's mission is clear, and it's to help women stop shrinking and speak up and know that they are never alone. And through her trauma-informed legal practice and unwavering commitment to truth, she is helping rewrite the story for women everywhere, one voice at a time. That is so beautiful, and I love that it is centered around voice. Was there ever a catalyst in your life that made you step up? Welcome to the show, by the way. That made you step up and really activate your voice?
Thank you for having me, by the way.
Yeah.
Really happy to be here. The catalyst, I think it's because my mom was silent. So as you kind of mentioned, I grew up with childhood abuse by my father. He was the abusive person, both, physically, emotionally, sexually. And my mom knew it was happening and she said nothing. And so with his abuse and her silence, I think that really drew me to not stay silent. Like when there's injustice happening, I can't help myself but speak up. So that was, I think, what was the catalyst of it. What got me on my own journey was having my own daughter, right? When I gave her life. For me, with my mom growing up, I never saw her. I was never angry at her for not speaking up. She, for me, was also a victim of my dad's abuse. So I wasn't really mad at her when I was younger, but when I had my own daughter and the natural instinct that happens of wanting to protect your daughter and not letting harm happen to them, that's when I was angry at my mom for never saying anything, despite watching it and knowing what was going on at home.
Yeah, for sure. I have 2 daughters and they've been a huge catalyst in my own life, like with the way I use my voice and what I want to model to them. And it really does change your perspective. So I'm really sorry that happened to you, and way to, shift the narrative to make it count for good. And it probably just gives you such perspective too, to help others, like it gives you a level of understanding that's much deeper.
Exactly. Like when somebody comes into my office, I understand the feelings that they're having of being helpless and hopeless and, really scared to speak out. And how are people going to react when they find out what happened to them, and who's going to believe them, and what are they going to do if, they speak out and they lose friends or family as a result of it. So I've been in that place. And so, yes, I can understand from my own experience the feelings that they're having.
What a gift to them. So where do you start? So let's say someone's listening to this and they're carrying something within them, and like one of your clients, they've already made it to you, which is one thing. But if someone hasn't, where do they start or where do you tell them to start?
I always told people to start by just even acknowledging that the event occurred, right? I think there's so much because of the abuse or the assault or the harassment. It's very normal, and a result of the abuse to tell yourself, well, am I overreacting? Did it really happen? Maybe I'm overreading it. They're not going to believe me, or nobody else. They saw it, but they didn't say anything, so maybe it really didn't happen. And just questioning whether like your truth even exists.
Oh, yeah.
And so I always tell people just that first step of just acknowledging this event occurred, getting it out from whatever's ruminating and just writing it down. For me, I started with a journal. So I always recommend just like a journal to people because it is hard to speak it at times. And I think if you can just write it down, and some people I even say like you could draw a picture, right? Some people have a hard time writing the words because they're not even sure what happened to them. They can draw it or write it down. And I think step one is just acknowledging the moment or the event occurred in your life, that there's something that's affecting you right now that you need to address.
Yeah, because it's like confusing sometimes, and I think that's where you get into that gaslighting and like people asking, well, were you drinking, or just all of these questions that come up. I know that I have an incident in my past that I kind of question, and I've looked at and been. I guess I just looked up this person and I was like, what if he was running for public office? Would I come out? And it just really makes you think about the bravery that's required of that. And so let's talk a little bit about gaslighting. Did you experience that? I guess your mom probably did too. And so what have you learned about that? And I mean, it's just risen up in pop culture so much too.
Yeah. So yes, we didn't have a name for gaslighting when I grew up. That word didn't exist. As I've learned it, my biggest gaslight was the silence, right? Like I lived in a home where all the adults that were supposed to be protecting me weren't saying anything about what was going on. So to me, that was the biggest gaslight, where nobody's acknowledging this terrifying person that's my father doing these things and pretending like it never happened, right? Like, let's just put on our happy face, put on our clothes and move on with our day. Like that event and that situation never happened, right? Where he had like a completely angry outburst, used every vile name there was to a 12-year-old kid. But you know what? Let's get on your way and, we're going to go to church, And so that really, I think, messes with you when you're a kid and even an adult, when people are just like not acknowledging an event that is so traumatic that it actually happened. And so that is something I carried. And that's why I carried, all of those things without ever talking about it. Like the first time I really talked about the details of what had happened to me was when I came out with my book, just like 2 years ago. Right. And so all of those events that had happened when I was a kid, I had been trying to suppress, pretend it didn't happen, because that's the norm that I grew up with and what we know called gaslighting.
Oh, that gave me chills, like full body chills. And I think that's so powerful to point out that the gaslight is silence. And because it's like a muscle that we have to, not only is it that, but it's like this learned way of behaving where you just stuff it down or you don't talk about what's really going on. And I mean, for me, I feel like it is a muscle that I have to flex all the time and catch myself, especially with my kids, when I'm not saying what needs to be said. And like my daughter did something that hurt my feelings the other day, which is rare. Usually, you're the adult and all that. And I carried it around with me for a day. And finally I was like, I can't keep carrying this around, and I have to speak up. And I want us to be able to have that communication. That's so key in so many ways. And do you find that a lot of people you work with have just a general impaired communication?
For sure. For all the reasons I said, because, for example, like people at work, right? Who have been harassed in the workplace, it's happening by a boss, or they have tried to report it and nothing's happened. And so again, they've already started with the premise that people don't believe them and nobody's going to do anything about it, right? They're all alone in this circumstance. And maybe I am overreacting to this situation because the people that are supposed to be protecting me, aren't doing anything about it. So that does affect communication if you feel like nobody will listen or nobody will believe you, or you're making it a big deal and nobody else sees this as a problem, right? Which again, that's how I grew up, which was what's the problem, right? My mom, even till this day, we'll talk about what a great father he was because he didn't, kick me out and he fed me and he put a roof over my head. And that is true, right? But we have to acknowledge the things that he did that hurt, us as well. And she's unwilling to do that.
Wow. That must be tough.
It is. I think that's sometimes, it's like, was he worse or was my mom worse, right? And like, I think my father's now passed. And so I think with my mom, I think I've accepted like that's the capacity I think that she has based on her upbringing and her own trauma that she experienced. And I have empathy for that. But yeah, that is hard. Like you don't talk about it because there's really nothing to talk about. She cannot acknowledge it, even after he's passed and no longer here.
Wow. What work have you personally had to do to get to where you're able to talk about this,
Yeah.
in you're giving her a lot of grace and compassion and understanding and which is legit, right? Like everybody's doing the best they can,
Yeah.
But what kind of work have you had to do personally along with your legal work?
Oh, so much work. So much personal work. And that's
shows.
Yeah,
It shows.
thank you. Yeah, and I tell people that too, because it's like we all want a quick fix. And don't get me wrong, I was in that exact same place, right? When I started therapy, I was like, all right, we're going to do 4 sessions. I mean, what else would I need, right? I talked to the therapist 4 times and we're good.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
can we be out of here? Perfect.
Perfect. We're good. And I had that same mentality of like, I can fix things. I'm a quick learner. Like, let's just get this over with, right? But it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. And that's why I'm so passionate about the work I do, because when women have experienced sexual assault or sex harassment, it does affect you for a long time. And now you're responsible for cleaning it up, even though you had, wasn't your fault, but now you have to fix it, what's going on in your body and in your mind. So yes, it took me, it's been a journey. And I've done various things throughout the process. Therapy was one, and I continue talking to my therapist as new things come up. Especially as my daughter gets older. She's now 13. And, the triggers that happened when she was younger are different than the triggers that happen now as she's entering, to be a teenager. And so I still talk to the therapist. I did a lot of inner child work, and that was really helpful. And for people who don't know what inner child work is, so what we were talking about earlier, what had happened to me, I was basically suppressing it as, much as I could, right? Like, you got to forget about it. It didn't happen. You've gone to college, you've moved out of the house, you've gone to law school, you have a career, like, get over yourself. You're just being ungrateful, like, move on from that. And trying to suppress it was what was eating me up. And I had a lot of physical manifestations as a result of trying to suppress, the events that had happened as a child and not wanting to feel what it felt like to be abused by your dad, right?
Wow.
I had physical manifestation. I had ulcers that like wouldn't go away for, over a year and unable to, handle it. And so the inner child work came up, and the premise is you go back to, the trauma that you experienced as a child and let your body feel it as opposed to trying to suppress it. And so feel what it felt like as a child. And, for me, I was a terrified little kid, like crying in the corner. And I took myself back to that place and what that felt like so that the adult that I didn't have as a child can come back and tell her everything's going to be okay, right? What I needed. And that just released this energy. And it's really powerful. If you haven't had the experience, I find it a really powerful experience to kind of get past the emotion of it, because your body needs to feel it before it can essentially let it go. And so I did that work, a lot of journaling. The gratitude journal is something I always come back to and always recommend to people, especially because you kind of get stuck in your negative self-thoughts when you've had a bad experience. And the gratitude journal just allows you to get perspective of where you're at and, being right here, right now, and all the things, we can be grateful for, even if they seem very small.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. And I appreciate just how you put that when our inner child work and everything into words, it's very clear, very easy to understand. And I think sometimes it can just get confusing. So that was very practical, and which probably serves your work really well. And you've built something called a trauma-informed law practice. I've never heard of that. Did you coin that or?
I did not. I wish I could say I did. I have a survivor advocate. And so they have training for people to be trauma informed. And the reason being is lawyers are very linear thinking. We want everything in like a perfect timeline. We want all the dates. We want all the events. We want all the facts. And we're just going to like hound you for all of the answers. And we're going to question you to get all of our answers. And what's happening with that is re-traumatizing people that come into our office, right? Because if we're asking, why did you do that? Why were you there? We are causing the trauma. And so that was really eye-opening to me when I met Christy. And when you're asking the why questions, you're putting somebody in a defensive stance, and just changing the way we're asking for the information completely changes how the person shows up and the information they're able to provide. And so that was really important because I had never thought about re-traumatizing my own clients. Like that just hurt me. And I never wanted to do that. And so we did a lot of training with her. And there is a difference when people talk to the lawyer and when they talk to her. And so that's why we brought her on board. So there's kind of an in-between. She's not a lawyer, but the law process can be difficult and emotional. And so she's there to kind of help them along the way and train our team so that we're asking questions that aren't putting people in a defensive state, and so that we're able to understand how trauma works. So for example, what I was just telling you, lawyers like everything very linear. Well, when you've experienced trauma, you don't show up with linear. Everything shows up in like all these pieces. And then it's our job as a lawyer to piece it together and not expect somebody to provide it to us in that way. And not only are we able to train ourselves, but when we're writing, briefs to the court or trying to educate the other side, we're able to provide that education to them so they understand, why, the woman did what she did or why she showed up in the way she did.
That is so smart. That is so,
Yeah.
I wish every law firm would do that. As someone who's been divorced twice, and I went through a lawsuit that was years long about some real estate stuff, but it was still like yes, there's trauma, but it's stressful too. And I mean, you said you felt like you were re-traumatizing people, but the other attorneys do too. I remember, it's not their life, and to them, it's just another day at work a lot of times. And I remember the opposing attorney, I had met her before. And then, we went through a hard hearing. At least it was hard for me. And then when we walked out the door, she was like, "Hi, how are you?" And I was like, she was on the opposing side. And I was just so offended, like, and it hits you in a lot of different ways. And that is
Yeah.
just so incredibly just profound and moving that you're able to care for people in that way and just provide another level, So,
Yeah. We recognize how important it is. So yeah, so she, before they have to go in front of the opposing side, she does like a grounding exercise with our client
wow.
before we go in to help, calm the nerves and calm the anxiety, and allows the lawyers to do their job and advocate for our clients while she's like caring for them. So they're, able to mentally show up the way they need to.
No, it's beautiful. Well, okay. So let's talk about really speaking up and finding that solid ground to stand on when you have something going on and you have to take action or just speak up. You say stop the silence. So in all your advocacy work. So what is the significance there, and how do you really start to build that?
So the significance of stopping the silence is really like, if you don't say anything, the only person you're continuing to harm is yourself, right? So if the abuse happened or the harassment or the assault, whatever may have happened to you, by not saying anything about it and not speaking up, you're continuing to harm yourself and protect the person that did whatever they did to you. And so I'm a big proponent of having to speak out, and it could be different for different people. The first time I ever spoke out, and for me, my standing up action was finally when I wrote my book. Prior to that, I didn't say anything. And the person that I was hurting was myself. With my clients, when they experience something, by not speaking up, they're letting the person get away with it. And by speaking up for themselves, they're empowering themselves, knowing they have a voice, they have rights, and that person is not allowed to do, whatever they might have done. And so that is the reason I have my platform. And I help people do that by letting them know that they're not alone when they have to do it. Because it is really scary. You feel like you have to do this, you have to stand up all by yourself. And it's like, no, you got it. You got your people. So you got my team. If you're a client here, you got your team here with Christy and myself and the other people that work here. But also, I think it's important for them to have, like a therapist or friends that are supporting them as well, like having your people. Because I think if you have people in your life that are telling you, no, don't say anything, just keep it quiet, don't worry about it, let it go. I think you kind of need to move away from that group maybe for a little bit so you can advocate for yourself. So I think that's really important, having your team around you.
What made you choose such a fiery title for the book?
Well, I think I'm a fiery person, so that probably does it. But I think it was just like no more. Like I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to not say anything to continue protecting, I don't know, my dad's good name that maybe he had. I don't even think he had a good name. So it's just like, what am I doing this for? And I wanted to stop this like generational trauma that has continued in my family for so long. I'm the youngest of 10 kids. And I didn't want to pass it on to my daughter. It needed to stop somewhere. And so I'm very fired up about that, of wanting to stop it, not only in my own family, and then stop it for others. Like we should all be living our best life. And I know we're all able to, and we're very powerful, beings. And I don't want the person that hurts you to continue to hurt you for the rest of your life.
You're the youngest of 10 kids.
I'm the youngest of 10 kids.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Are you still close with your siblings, or?
I am. I am close with my siblings. It's been, me coming out with the book was challenging in the sense that, I just told you I've been on this like path of healing and doing my personal work. And so I was ready to speak out, but I feel like I forced, the issue on my siblings who may not have been ready. And that was a really tough decision for me of how to handle that, right? It's my story, but it's also, part of their story. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure they weren't that surprised, because if they know you, you started this firm years ago and have really stepped up, and, you've taken on a lot of clients. Do you get scared? How do you navigate fear for yourself and help your clients manage that?
I think for me, like, because and this is what, because I'm not scared. And people ask me that, like, why are you not scared? And going up against, people that are always have more money, more resources, more power than we do on this side. And I'm never afraid. And I think it's primarily because I had to face my biggest bully. I had to face my father, and nobody was scarier than him. And so I think if I'm able to do that, it just naturally, like, nobody else can really hurt me, right? The person that was your protector, the person that was supposed to love you, that was supposed to be bringing you up, and he didn't do that. And I was able to, rise from that. Everybody else, like, what are you going to do? So I think that's where it comes from. I've already dealt with my biggest bully, and so everybody else doesn't seem that scary.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. No, that's incredible, really. And then, the truth is just so powerful, right? And it feels so good. And do you see your clients, once they start down this path of truth, of speaking up, start to transform?
Yes. And you see it. And that's what's so beautiful, and why I continue to do the work I do. Because when they come in, they are so scared, and they feel like just, helpless and hopeless, and they can't see how it's going to be when they get through it. And everybody who leaves are better off than they were when they started. They have built self-confidence of themselves. They feel at peace, and they feel empowered to stand up for themselves without us,
Yeah.
So we're a catalyst to the next part of their life.
Do you have an example you could share? Like
Yeah, for sure. So I probably have lots of examples. One that just comes into mind right now is a woman who was discriminated repeatedly at work, just wasn't given a chance, to get promoted. They just didn't want the woman to get promoted, and continuously passed her up. And she worked there for probably 7 years and kept, asking for it, and they wouldn't do it. And finally, she got our firm involved and stood up for herself. And she now runs her own business, and she became an entrepreneur. And she has this really successful women's golf outerwear business. And that was something she would have never done had she not, taken a stand and said, no, what you did wasn't right. I'm a woman, but I can do this job. My gender doesn't affect it. And standing up to them and then creating her own business after that.
Yeah, that's
Really
scary
powerful.
because, like, what if you like your job? Then are you like making everyone there not like you? It's like, I mean, I'm a recovering people pleaser, so.
Yeah, and there's a lot of us like that.
Yeah, yeah. So good. That's very inspiring to hear,
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people listening that have felt like they have faced injustice in many different ways. And if they're feeling powerless, what advice do you offer them to help them find their voice or maybe take action?
To take inventory about how much power you have, like take
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
right of all the things you have done to get to this point right now. And, I mean, we have kids, we give birth, to life. And so that is so powerful. And so just like that, like remind yourself of that, or how you got to the city that you're living in, or if you have a relationship, how you got into that relationship, whatever it might be, take inventory of all the powerful things you have already done to get to this moment right now. And something might have hurt it or dampened it or changed it along the way, but that still exists inside of you. And so remind yourself of that, and then visualize and, think about where is it that you want to be. You got to know where you're going as well.
Yeah, we discount and normalize a lot of things that are displays of our power. I know I do it all the time, and then I'll sit there and go like, "What have I done?" Like, and I won't be able to remember anything. And so, that again is like a muscle that you can build. And do you have a little trick for it? You keep a note in your phone or like something like that, or?
I go back to this gratitude journal, right? Like, and that helps me like gain perspective when I go down, because it's not like I live this happy life every single day of my whole life, forever onward. But when I get into a rut or I'm going through a lot of things, I always come back to my gratitude journal, because that allows me to take inventory of all the great things that have already happened, that I've already done to get me to this point right now.
Yeah.
And so
Is that one of
3 things.
and what?
I just say, like, even just 3 things, like just do 3 things a day, it could be real small. You don't have to list everything, but to start the process so you practice that.
For sure. And keeping it manageable, like 3 things is, I love that. Like anything that you just feel like, okay, I can do one thing, like, like that's great. I was going to ask like about strategies you have for staying motivated or maintaining resilience. And that sounds like one good one. But maybe you have some other ones when you face challenges or when your clients do, what you might recommend.
Another thing that I've picked up, I did a lot of work and I continue to do, Joe Dispenza, and his work is really about changing your thoughts. Change your thoughts, change your life. And so one of the tricks, I guess, that I've developed is becoming aware of the negative things you tell yourself, right? Like, what have I done? I haven't accomplished anything. Didn't do anything with my life or whatever it might be. And it's like, you got to change that. That is a negative self-talk. No, what's the positive? Like, change, instead of saying I haven't done anything, look at how much I've done, right? Like just changing the wording when you catch yourself doing it. So I guess it's like, you have to become aware of the fact that those thoughts are there. So step 1, and then step 2, you got to reframe that thought so it's something else.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of a reframe. And, and I think to me, sometimes even when I don't think it's true, I just force myself to find a new truth, right? And like just, and that has so much power too when you're just using your voice. And do you find a lot of power in saying things out loud?
I find a lot of power in writing things out.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, saying out loud, but also like before I can get to the speaking out part, for me, writing it out is really powerful because you can see it on paper.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's one of the things I've learned. And, it's not all your thoughts are true. That's, was like a light bulb moment. It's like, oh, everything I tell myself isn't true. And when you realize that is like, wow, you can do a lot. And you can tell yourself what you want, like you just said, what you want the truth to be.
Yeah.
You know?
What do you envision moving forward as the legacy that you will leave?
Oh, that's a good question. So I just created and we just launched our foundation. So the HAE Fired Up Foundation. And
Wow. Congratulations. That's incredible. Yeah.
thank you. And so really wanting to, help people who, don't have the resources, who have experienced some sort of sexual trauma to be able to, go to school, find a trade, open a business, get mental health care needs, whatever it might be, but not letting the financial inability stop them, right? If they have the power and the drive to move forward, I want them to have the ability to do that. So that the foundation was just created. I hope that's a legacy I leave behind, is to allow more and more women to live their best life and not be stuck based on their circumstances that happen to them.
Yeah, because that's so hard too. Was just if someone feels trapped, like maybe your mom did, or someone feels very limited by their circumstances, and it just can feel like there's nothing you can do. And especially too when you're in a, I don't know, cycle or a culture of not speaking up and wanting everyone comfortable and everyone, you just can feel trapped. So that's really beautiful because giving back, I mean, there's nothing more satisfying,
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
right? I mean, like that's where heart is, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Who are some of your role models? Who inspires you?
My sister really inspired me as a kid. So the abuse with my dad, I was told I was the youngest of 10 kids. So
Yeah.
my sister right above me is the one who finally said something, and she left the house and said something to the family, right? She said, he's doing this, I'm leaving the house. And so that's why the sexual abuse stopped with me. So that at that time was really inspiring to see her finally saying something, to stop the conduct, the sexual abuse with him. The other stuff continued, but so she inspires me. Martin Luther King is really inspirational to me. It's just like when you just anybody who stands up and says, we're not going to allow this to continue anymore. So Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, I wasn't alive during their time, but they're real inspirations to me of standing up, no matter what the consequences may be.
Agreed. What consequences have you seen that have surprised you? And how have you, maybe if they were not as positive, how have you turned those around?
I guess let's talk about the positive consequences. The weight that has been lifted. So me talking to you openly and freely, this was not the case, right? And so the weight that has been lifted, where these things that happened to me weighed so heavy on me, where I couldn't show up in my own body and feel comfortable in my own skin, no longer exist. And same thing, when you're going through it, you don't realize you can ever feel this way.
Mm,
And now that part of me is so foreign that I can't imagine being there. So that was I guess, a consequence that I didn't know, because I didn't know I could feel this way. So that's been huge. Kind of like on the negative consequence, or the consequence that I hadn't really thought through completely, was definitely with my family. And I, wasn't sure how it was going to go, but not everybody was really happy with my decision to come out. And so I kind of planned for it, and thought that might happen, but you really don't realize how it's going to feel until you're in it. Because like I said, I have been really close with my siblings and nieces and nephews, and kind of navigating, their reaction or how they feel about it was an unintended consequence, or unplanned consequence, I
yeah,
guess.
for sure. I can imagine. And then what about building your business in this style that you've built? It's so supportive. I imagine there's probably people that listen and think, gosh, I would love to really have something like that does, provide support to people in the way that I could, whatever field they're in. So, like, how is the work environment there since you do all this work? Like, what's that like, and how has it blossomed? And then, what advice would you give to people if they wanted to do something like that and didn't really know where to start?
So I think it's blossomed because I'm a better person. My relationships are better with my clients, with my colleagues, with the people that I work with, because I'm being my authentic self. Like I said, I'm not holding this weight or this secret anymore.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's really powerful. I just want to pause and say, like, yeah, yeah.
like here I am and I'm not hiding anything. So that's really been big for me. And so that's just strengthened my relationships all around. For other people, I just think we all have these gifts. So and that's why my book is called Fired Up, Fueling Triumph from Trauma, because things that are so bad and so negative, they also were a gift for you to do something with it, And so you can change it, like reframe it, change it to use it now to your advantage. And that's really what I've done. I've taken something that was really traumatic and awful, but that really is my superpower as I go forward in the cases I work on and on behalf of the clients that I do.
Gah, that's badass, right? It is we can transform it into our superpower 100%. And really, like, I think just taking baby steps toward that really can build up in a way that you don't expect, like, really so beautiful. What advice would you give someone who's maybe considering a legal career and or helping others? What advice would you give them?
I mean, I would say do it, right? Because
Yeah.
I just think it's so fulfilling, where you go home and you're proud of what you do, and you're proud to tell your daughter what you do, and you're proud of, like, helping all of these individuals. So you always feel better about yourself. And so I definitely encourage it. I also love the rule of law. I think it matters. And we have so many rights that this country is built on. And so I think having the power to be able to exercise them, to know them, and to help other people navigate them is really powerful. So I encourage all to do it. And I always love talking to students that are considering going to law school.
Yeah, for sure. My sister went to law school at, I think, age 47, and then took the bar at age 50, and just
Good for her.
completely changed her life. It was so inspiring. And, she was really working to help others. She had been a court appointed special advocate for years and really just took it to the next level. And I was like, what a badass, right? Like, just there's no limits to when you can step into whatever it is you
Exactly.
want to do. Absolutely. You mentioned, like, our country and the rule of law. I'm just going to ask, how do you feel about the country right now? How's your outlook? Like, share your thoughts with me.
Well, right now it's really a fight of our systems. I mean, the judicial branch of government is fighting the executive branch. The executive branch thinks they have a lot of power and can do whatever they want. And that's where the courts and lawyers come in. The lawyers are there to say, no, you are not above the rule of law. There are still laws that you have to follow, regardless of the fact that you're the president of the country. And so that's where I see us at this stage of our country right now. It's a fight amongst the branches of government, the judiciary and the executive branch. And so that's why I think it's very powerful. We had a ceremony last week on National Law Day on May 1st, where lawyers across the country reaffirmed our oath. I haven't reaffirmed my oath in 23 years.
Wow.
To protect the rule of law, because as officers of the court, that is our job and our duty. So we reaffirmed our oath last week, which was really powerful and a great experience and a good reminder of why we took these positions. And again, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. The law applies to everybody, and they do have to abide by them.
Yeah. Lawyers get a bad rap sometimes, but, there's a lot
But
of
you need
there's a lot of helpful people,
Yeah.
and, like, it's intimidating to have someone on your side is really amazing. So, yeah, well, that's well said. And, we do want to live in a society that is just, and to feel like we have some recourse, and that's foundational, I think.
Yeah, and we do. And that goes back to also just standing up. Your rights mean nothing if you don't stand up for them, right? Like we can have all the laws in the world, but if nobody's exercising them, then they mean nothing. And so
Okay.
that's back to why it's important to know your rights and then exercise them
Yeah.
and speak up about them.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So let's just cover this for a minute. Like, sometimes it's very intimidating to speak up. I think we've all experienced this in one way or another on social media over the last however many years and 10. And so what do you recommend people how they really express their voice and find their confidence? Because that can be really intimidating too. Do you have any words around that?
I mean, I think it's different for everybody, right? Like a court case might not be for you, right?
Right.
Your podcast and your platform here is better for you, right? For somebody, it might be a social media platform. So it's just, I think it varies on the person. And for me, I wrote a book, so you can have your different platforms, but I think it's important to utilize your voice and speak out, because if you don't, then nobody knows that it exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done it too. And, I learned a lot, but I got a little tired. I was an advocate for Moms Demand Action for gun sense, to end people getting shot,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, less people getting shot sounds okay to me. So, but I think that there's a level of self-care in there too, where it's okay to take a break if you need to and really take care of yourself,
For
which I
sure.
experienced.
Yeah, because it is overwhelming when you feel like you're banging your head against the wall
Yeah.
and people aren't listening on the other side.
Yeah.
But giving up is also not an option, right? Because the consequence of not doing anything is also there. So,
Yeah.
but I agree with you. Sometimes you kind of just need to recharge, right? Take care of yourself so you can recharge and come back.
Absolutely. So there's so much value in that. And so, well, as we're coming to a close, what did we miss? Was there anything that we needed to address today that we didn't get to that you'd like to bring up? Or is there anything that you feel called to maybe reiterate or share before we go?
I always tell people not to wait, right? If they're trying to figure out what direction to go in, whether it might be starting a legal career or speaking out or wanting to help somebody or go on a healing path, whatever it is that you want to do, don't wait. Like take the first step, take some action, because you only have today. So I always tell people not to wait on whatever it is that they're leaning towards.
I just saw someone I know, she's a life coach, post about imperfect action. And, you've got to start somewhere. Your first action is usually not going to be perfect anyway. So just go ahead and
Just
rip the
do it.
Band-Aid. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you. And thank you for your voice and for the example that you're setting for others and for what you're doing for others and to impact the world and namely women. And it's just so incredibly beautiful to witness and to hear from and so inspiring. So how can everyone find you? And I know you're doing speaking as well. And maybe how can they connect with you if they'd like to?
The best way is probably on my website. It's real easy. It's Alreen. It's ALREEN.com. And you can find all of my information on there.
I know. Are you the only Alreen?
The only one I know.
That's amazing. You're like
Yeah.
Oprah. I love it. So, yeah, very cool. Everything will be in the show notes too, including a link to the book, which I highly recommend. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you for the way you show up in the world and for making time to talk today.
Well, thank you again for having me and for having this platform for people to speak out.
Thank you so much to Alreen, and thank you to you for being here. I found that just incredibly inspiring. I love talking to people that are boots on the ground, that are doing it, that are putting things in action and really making this world a better place and a more just place. Like that's incredible. And I would be so curious to see what this brought up in you and to hear kind of what it made you think about in your own life, because it made me think about a lot of different things. And speaking truth is so incredibly important to me, as I'm sure many of you know. So how amazing. So big thanks to her. I really enjoyed that. And I just am sending you lots and lots of love. Connect with the show. Get on the newsletter list if you haven't. It's at amyedwards.com, amyedwards.info. There's tons of shows, courses, all sorts of my contents, episodes that I've been a guest on, and all sorts of stuff. And I just invite you to check in with me whenever you want. Send feedback. I would love to hear your feedback anywhere. Comment on YouTube, send me a DM, reply to my newsletter, whatever it is. I'm Real Amy Edwards on Instagram, and of course, The Magic Babe on TikTok, and The Amy Edwards Show on YouTube. So anyway, I just love you so much, and you keep showing up for life. Write it down, whatever it is. That's a place to start, right? And even if you just need to vent something to me, I'm here for it, right? All right. I love you so much. Thank you so much for everything. And you just keep being your badass self and keep showing up and shining bright. Till next time. Thank you so much for being here. Please rate, review, and follow us. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Keep shining bright.